World War II is known for its brutalities, but one of the darkest and least discussed horrors was the shocking cannibalism and immense torment of Japanese soldiers stranded on a remote island where hunger and desperation drive soldiers to unimaginable lengths, not just to survive, but sometimes as an act of pure domination. These horrific acts, often targeting prisoners and even their own fallen comrades, became a chilling chapter of the war as Allied forces, locked in their madness, escalated to a level that in some cases surpassed the Nazis. Welcome to a new video. Let's discover this frightening and disturbing side of World War II. If you like this type of content, subscribe to our channel. It's free. Now let's get started. Number 10. Cannibalism, a horrible war crime. Japanese forces in the Pacific theater of World War II perpetrated unspeakable atrocities that exceeded the standard brutality of war. As Allied forces advanced and resources dwindled, some Japanese soldiers resorted to cannibalism out of desperation. However, in many cases, this horrific practice was used as a tool of terror and control. Instead of simple reports of survival, reports emerged of Japanese commanders ordering the consumption of enemy soldiers and local civilians. One chilling account describes the fate of 8 American pilots who were captured after rescuing Chichijima. Some were killed immediately, while others were kept alive to be eaten later. In particularly gruesome cases, the victims were reportedly dismembered while still alive. The Japanese government has attempted to downplay or erase this dark chapter in history. Verified accounts confirmed that cannibalism was employed as a deliberate tactic during the war. These acts of extreme cruelty serve as a stark reminder of the depths of human depravity in times of conflict. Number 9. The Nanjing Massacre, a dark chapter in history. The Nanjing Massacre, also known as the Rape of Nanking, marks one of the darkest chapters in modern history. After a brutal victory in Shanghai during the early stages of World War II, the Imperial Japanese Army set its sights on Beijing, the capital of China. He anticipated significant military losses. Chinese nationalist leader Chiang Kai-shek ordered a withdrawal of troops from the city, leaving behind only a small contingent of untrained auxiliary forces. This decision proved catastrophic as it left civilians vulnerable to the impending horrors that would unfold over the next 6 weeks. On December 1, 1937, the Chinese government officially abandoned Nanking and placed it under the control of an international committee tasked with protecting civilians. However, on December 13th, Japanese troops led by General Matsui invaded the city, driven by a combination of hunger and desire for revenge for their fallen comrades. These soldiers unleashed a wave of violence that would lead to unimaginable suffering. Families were massacred in their homes. Public executions became common, and the streets were filled with corpses. Estimates of the number of deaths vary widely. However, it is believed that between 200,000 and 300,000 people lost their lives during this period. One of the most horrendous aspects of the massacre was the widespread sexual violence inflicted on women. Reports indicate that between 20,000 and 80,000 women were brutally raped and murdered. The destruction was extensive. Approximately a third of the town was set on fire as Japanese forces attempted to loot and annihilate the city. The massacre officially began on December 13th and lasted 6 weeks. During this time, captured Chinese soldiers were executed en masse in violation of wartime laws. Male civilians were also attacked, many falsely accused of being soldiers. Summarily, the Japanese army employed tactics such as mopping up operations in which any able-bodied man was assumed to be a soldier and subsequently executed. The international community's response was limited, although the efforts of foreign nationals living in Nanjing to establish a safety zone to protect many civilians were unable to escape the violence. These individuals risked their lives to intervene during atrocities and document what they witnessed. Their accounts described Nanking during this time as hell on earth, highlighting the extreme brutality exhibited by Japanese troops. The aftermath of the massacre left deep scars in Nanjing and China. Mass graves were created throughout the city amid the chaos, making an accurate count of the victims impossible. The Tokyo War Crimes Court later addressed these atrocities, but many perpetrators faced minimal consequences for their actions. The Nanjing massacres, their legacy, continue to stir strong feelings and discussions about historical memory and responsibility. Survivors' testimonies have been preserved through various initiatives aimed at ensuring that these events are not forgotten. The massacre serves as a stark reminder of humanity's capacity for violence and the importance of remembering history to prevent future atrocities. Number 8. The attack on Pearl Harbor, the Day of Infamy. On December 7, 1941, at 7:48 a.m. Hawaii time, Japan launched a surprise air assault on the U.S. naval base at Pearl Harbor. This devastating attack marked a pivotal moment in history that led to the United States' entry into World War II and altered the course. During the conflict, the assault involved a meticulously planned operation with 353 Japanese aircraft, including torpedo bombers, dive bombers, and fighters. The first wave targeted airfields and battleships with the goal of incapacitating the U.S. Pacific Fleet. In the first minutes of the attack, 4 battleships were hit, including the USS Arizona, which suffered a catastrophic explosion after a bomb ignited its ammunition depots. This explosion resulted in the loss of 1,177 crew members, making it one of the deadliest incidents of the attack. In just over an hour, Japanese forces inflicted heavy damage on American military assets. 8 battleships were damaged, with 4 sinking to the bottom of the harbor. In addition to the battleships, many other ships and more than 100 aircraft were destroyed or rendered inoperable. The human toll was staggering. Approximately 2,393 Americans lost their lives that day, with 1,178 injured. President Franklin D. Roosevelt referred to December 7th as a date that will live in infamy. During his speech to Congress the next day, he mentioned, "Last night the Japanese attacked the island," and emphasized that the attack was carried out without a formal declaration of war, violating international conventions and attracting global condemnation. This unprovoked attack propelled the United States into the conflict, which led to immediate declarations of war against Japan, and later Germany and Italy, and a subsequent attack by Japan. The strategic motivations behind Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor arose from its desire to secure dominance in the Pacific and access vital resources in Southeast Asia. Japan had been expanding its empire throughout the 1930s and sought to eliminate the American military presence in the region to facilitate future conquests. The attack was aimed at crippling the U.S. Pacific Fleet and preventing interference with Japan's expansion plans. Despite the initial success of the attack, several critical factors ultimately contributed to Japan's defeat in World War II. Notably, 3 American aircraft carriers were not present at Pearl Harbor during the attack. They were conducting training exercises at sea. This absence allowed them to remain operational and, in retrospect, play a crucial role in subsequent battles in the Pacific. While Japan achieved a tactical victory at Pearl Harbor, it failed strategically by provoking an American response that would lead to its eventual downfall. The attack galvanized American public opinion and led to an unprecedented mobilization of military resources. Number 7. Biological warfare experiments. During World War II, Japan participated in horrific biological warfare experiments aimed at spreading diseases among the military and civilian population. Central to these efforts was Unit 731, a covert military facility responsible for conducting inhumane experiments on prisoners. Under the leadership of General Shiro Ishii, the unit focused on research into pathogens such as anthrax, typhoid, and plague, testing its effects on captives without any ethical consideration. From 1940 to 1941, Japan implemented a series of biological attacks by dropping biodegradable bombs filled with infected rats and fleas on Chinese territories. These attacks were designed to maximize the spread of diseases that caused tens of thousands of deaths, far more devastating than conventional warfare. The Japanese military believed that if germ warfare was banned internationally, it indicated its effectiveness, so they applied these brutal tactics without regard for human life. Experiments included exposing prisoners to lethal pathogens to observe the resulting diseases. Estimates suggest that up to 580,000 people may have died as a result of these attacks and biological experiments. In addition to using infected animals as weapons, Japanese forces also contaminated food supplies and wells with deadly pathogens, further exacerbating suffering among civilian populations. The use of biological weapons was not only a violation of wartime ethics, but also a calculated strategy aimed at weakening enemy forces through disease. The extensive research conducted at Unit 731 and similar facilities allowed the Japanese military to refine its dissemination methods for maximum impact. They even developed techniques for airstrikes and pathogen fumigation in specific areas. Despite the scale of these atrocities, many perpetrators faced minimal consequences after the war. U.S. authorities granted immunity to some members of Unit 731 in exchange for the findings of their investigations, allowing them to escape prosecution for war crimes. Number 06. The Army of Freezing Experiments. Engineer H. Yoshimura, known as the Scientific Devil, carried out notorious freezing experiments in Unit 731. Unlike his colleagues who focused on surgical experiments, Yoshimura studied the effects of extreme cold on human subjects. His methodology consisted of freezing prisoners' limbs in ice water and studying their response to various treatments. In one documented case, Yoshimura experimented on a 3-day-old baby to compare the effects of freezing between infants and adults. Another witness in New York described seeing 2 naked men freeze to death in sub-zero temperatures while being filmed through these brutal experiments. Yoshimura developed a resistance to freezing. His legacy remains that of a war criminal rather than a memorable scientist. Number 5. The Comfort Women System. The Japanese military instituted a system of sexual slavery known as comfort women during World War II, subjecting hundreds of thousands of women to horrific exploitation between 1932 and 1945. Initially, Japanese women were recruited through deception or coercion, but the program quickly expanded to include women from occupied territories such as Korea, China, and the Philippines. This large-scale human trafficking operation was intended to provide actual services to Japanese soldiers, ostensibly to reduce instances of violence and prevent the spread of sexually transmitted diseases among the troops. However, the comfort women system had the opposite effect. Instead of curbing sexual violence, it institutionalized abuse and led to increased cases of rape and illness. Women were often forced to go to brothels known as comfort stations, where they endured brutal conditions. Many were subjected to repeated sexual assaults by multiple soldiers each day, causing severe physical and psychological trauma. The dehumanization was profound. These women were often called public baths or military supplies, stripping them of their identity and agency, the stigma surrounding virginity, and premarital marriage. In many cultures, another layer of suffering was added for survivors. Many comfort women faced immense shame and isolation upon returning home, leading some to take their own lives, while others remained silent about their experiences until death. The trauma inflicted on these women was compounded by social rejection and lack of support. The women's issue gained international attention in the early 1990s when survivors began speaking out and demanding justice. In 1991, a group of former women filed a class action lawsuit against the Japanese government for human rights violations, sparking a broader lawsuit over Japan's wartime actions that led to the government's public recognition in 1993 that comfort stations had existed. However, Japan's admission was met with controversy as they expressed remorse and denied legal responsibility for the atrocities committed. In response to growing pressure, Japan established the Asian Women's Fund in 1995 to provide compensation to survivors. However, this fund relied on private donations rather than government funds, leading many activists to view it as inadequate. The issue remains sensitive in Japan, with ongoing debates over historical memory and responsibility. Number 04. Chemical weapons tests. Japan's Unit 731 was famous for developing chemical weapons that would later be tested on prisoners. These included educational agents such as mustard gas and cyanide. Witness accounts reveal horrific scenes where prisoners suffered agonizing deaths from exposure to these chemicals. The use of portable gas chambers allowed for experiments in field conditions as well as in Japan. The deployment of chemical agents against their enemies remains one of the darkest aspects of their wartime actions. The Sixth Massacre, the systematic purge in Singapore. Following the fall of Singapore to Japanese forces in February 1942, a horrific campaign of mass murder known as Suk-Ching unfolded from February 18th to March 4th. Japanese soldiers carried out a systematic purge of individuals considered anti-Japanese, resulting in between 40,000 and 50,000 deaths, although some estimates suggest that the number of victims could be much higher. The operation was overseen by the Kempi Tai, the Japanese military police, and targeted primarily ethnic Chinese residents. This brutal law was fueled by long-standing tensions from the Second Sino-Japanese War and served as a demonstration of Japanese dominance in the region. The Japanese military viewed the Chinese population with suspicion, believing that many were sympathetic to the Chinese. During the operation, Chinese men between the ages of 18 and 50 were detained under the pretext of detecting anti-Japanese elements. Many were taken to designated locations where they faced execution. The murders occurred at several locations in Singapore, including Pangol and Changi beaches. They were often shot en masse, and their bodies dumped in mass graves or thrown into the sea. The massacre spread beyond Singapore's borders and affected Chinese communities in Malaysia and other occupied territories. Tamil Indians and civilians from Burma and Thailand also suffered at the hands of Japanese forces. During this wave of violence, this widespread brutality showed a pattern of systematic oppression against perceived enemies throughout Japanese-occupied regions, while Japanese authorities later acknowledged that atrocities occurred during this period, vastly underestimated the death toll and claimed only around 6,000 casualties. This denial has continued to provoke outrage among survivors and their descendants, many of whom seek recognition and justice for the victims. The aftermath of the Suk-Ching massacre remains a sad part of Singapore's past in 1947. British authorities held war crimes trials against several Japanese officers implicated in the massacre. Efforts to honor the victims have grown more intense in the decades since the discovery of mass graves in Singapore, leading to calls for official apologies and reparations from Japan. The massacre serves as a stark reminder of the atrocities committed during times of war and highlights the importance of recognizing historical injustices to foster reconciliation and healing within affected communities. Number 03. Inhuman medical experiments. As World War II progressed, Japan intensified its efforts in weapons development and medical experimentation on civilians and captured soldiers. Among the most atrocious acts were the practice of live sectioning without anesthesia in facilities, such as Unit 731. Thousands of men, women, and children became subjects of these grotesques and experiments. Former Unit 731 member Okawa Fukatu revealed disturbing accounts of pregnant women being vivisected to study fetal conditions. Japanese scientists carried out invasive surgeries on prisoners, organ removal, and limb amputation without regard for ethics or morality. Many victims were executed after experiments or buried alive, adding layers of horror to these already gruesome acts. Number 02. The Railway of Death, a monument to suffering. Following major setbacks in the naval battles of 1942, Japan attempted to establish a land supply route to connect its home islands with the occupied territories, leading to the construction of the infamous Burma Railway, commonly known as the Death Railway. The project from Thailand to Burma was marked by extreme suffering and loss of life, involving the forced labor of approximately 200,000 Asian civilians and 60,000 prisoners of war. Construction of the train began in June 1942 and continued until October 1943, during which workers worked in horrendous conditions to lay 415 kilometers of railway tracks. The route traversed treacherous jungle terrain infested with disease-carrying insects and subject to monsoon rains. Workers faced extreme physical challenges, such as traversing mountains and building bridges over rivers and canyons. One of the most notorious sections, known as Hellfire Pass, became famous for its brutal working conditions and high death toll. The prisoners endured grueling 18-hour workdays with little food or medical care, their diet consisting mainly of small portions of boiled rice and spoiled meat or fish, often contaminated with rat droppings and infested with maggots. Many succumbed to diseases such as dissident cholera and tropical ulcers. Due to malnutrition and unsanitary living conditions, plus a lack of proper medical treatment, it meant that sick workers were often left to die while others continued to work in harsh conditions. The mortality rate among workers was staggering. Estimates suggest that around 990,000 Asian civilians died during construction, along with approximately 12,000 Allied soldiers. The main causes of death included mistreatment, hunger, overwork, and disease. The Japanese military's relentless drive for speed led to severe punishments for those who did not meet work quotas. Some prisoners were executed for alleged insubordination. Despite the immense suffering inflicted on the workers, the railway was completed ahead of schedule on October 16, 1943, the Japanese army using it to transport supplies and troops during their campaigns in Southeast Asia. However, the construction left a lasting legacy of pain and trauma that continues to echo today along the railroad route. In the decades since the war, such somber monuments have been erected, reminders of the human cost of this endeavor. Hellfire Pass has become a place of commemoration where visitors can learn about the atrocities committed during its construction. These monuments serve not only as tributes to those who lost their lives, but also as educational resources intended to ensure that such horrors are not forgotten. The Death Railway is a monument to suffering, a stark reminder of the brutality of war and the exploitation of human life for military gain. Recognizing this history is crucial to honoring victims and fostering discussions about human rights violations in conflict situations. As we reflect on this dark chapter in history, it is essential to remember those who endured unimaginable hardships and ensure their stories are told and remembered for generations to come. Number 01. Atrocities during the Bataan Death March. The Bataan Death March is one of the most infamous atrocities committed during World War II after American General Edward P. King surrendered to Japanese forces on April 9, 1942. Approximately 10,000 soldiers became prisoners of war and were forced to endure a grueling march to Camp O'Donnell in brutal conditions. Many soldiers succumbed to exhaustion or were executed for attempting to escape or even pausing to fetch water. Estimates suggest that between 7,000 and 10,000 men perished during this harrowing episode. We come to the end of this video. Tell us your opinion in the comments box. If you liked the video, give it a like, subscribe, and don't forget to hit the bell so you don't miss future videos like this one. See you next time!